You spot a snake in the yard, and it's not moving away. Before you decide what to do next, there's one question that matters more than any other. Is it venomous? Most people think they need to get close to answer that. They don't, and in most cases, getting close is exactly the wrong move. Here's the problem with almost every quick trick you've probably heard for identifying a venomous snake: triangular head shape, vertical pupils. A specific color pattern rhyme. Almost every one of these signs requires you to be close enough to see fine detail, which means close enough to be within striking range. If a method for staying safe requires you to get dangerously near the exact thing you're trying to avoid, it's not actually a safety method. It's a contradiction, so let's rebuild this from the ground up. Starting with what actually works from a distance. Then covering why the popular close-up tricks are far less reliable than people assume. The single most useful piece of information isn't a visual trick at all. It's knowing what venomous species actually live in your specific region before you ever encounter one. The United States has around 20 venomous snake species, but no single location has anywhere near that many. Most regions realistically have somewhere between 1 and 4 venomous species to worry about. And those species tend to be well documented, with consistent range maps available through state wildlife agencies. If you know that copperheads and timber rattlesnakes are the only venomous species in your county, you've already narrowed the identification problem down dramatically before you've even seen a snake. This single piece of preparation does more for your safety than any in-the-moment visual analysis ever could. Now let's talk about the visual signs people usually reach for, because understanding both their value and their limits matters. Head shape is probably the most commonly repeated rule. Venomous pit vipers, which include rattlesnakes, copperheads, and cottonmouths, tend to have a broad, triangular-shaped head that's noticeably wider than the neck behind it. Non-venomous snakes typically have a narrower, more uniform head shape that blends more smoothly into the neck. This rule has some real basis in anatomy, since pit vipers have venom glands located in the head that create that wider shape. But here's the catch. Many harmless snakes will flatten and widen their heads defensively when they feel threatened, specifically to mimic that triangular venomous shape and discourage predators. The hognose snake is a famous example of this exact bluff. So relying on head shape alone can actually backfire, making a harmless snake look more dangerous than it is, right when you're closest to it and least able to safely reconsider. Pupil shape is another commonly cited rule. Pit vipers generally have vertical, slit-like pupils, similar to a cat's eye, while most non-venomous snakes have round pupils. This is genuinely accurate for pit vipers specifically. But it comes with 2 serious problems. First, coral snakes, which are among the most venomous snakes in North America, have round pupils, completely breaking this rule. Second, and more practically, you cannot reliably see pupil shape from any safe distance. By the time you're close enough to check pupil shape, you've already eliminated the entire safety advantage the identification was supposed to give you. There's also the heat-sensing pit itself, the small indentation between the eye and nostril that gives pit vipers their name. This is actually one of the most anatomically reliable indicators available, since it's a defining physical feature unique to that group. The problem is identical to the pupil issue. That pit is small, and identifying it requires being close enough that the identification no longer serves any protective purpose. Now here's a color pattern rule you've probably heard, especially if you're in an area with coral snakes. Red touches yellow, kill a fellow. Red touches black, friend of Jack. This rhyme is meant to distinguish the venomous coral snake from its harmless mimic, the scarlet kingsnake, based on the order of colored bands on the body. In the specific regions of the southeastern United States where both species overlap, This rule does hold up reasonably well, and it's one of the few identification methods that doesn't require getting dangerously close, since band odor can often be judged from a reasonable distance with a decent look. But there's a major limitation most people don't know about. This rhyme only works reliably within the range where it was originally observed and tested. Similar-looking coral snake relatives exist elsewhere in the Americas, particularly in Mexico and Central and South America, where the color order pattern doesn't hold up the same way. And using this rule outside its tested range can be actively misleading. It's a regionally useful tool, not a universal law of snake identification. So if head shape can be faked, pupils and heat pits require dangerous proximity, and color rules only work in specific regions. What actually works from a real, safe distance? The most reliable distance-based approach combines three things: general body shape and size, behavior, and most importantly, knowing your local species beforehand. Most venomous pit vipers in the U.S. have relatively thick, heavy-bodied builds compared to many common non-venomous species, which tend to be slimmer and more streamlined for their length. This isn't a perfect rule either, since body shape varies by species and age, but combined with regional knowledge, it becomes genuinely useful. A thick-bodied snake in a region where the only venomous species is a heavy-bodied copperhead deserves real caution. A slender snake in that same region is very likely one of the many harmless local species instead. Behavior matters too, though with the same caveat about not testing it up close. Rattlesnakes will often rattle as a warning before anything else happens, and that sound alone, heard from a safe distance, is one of the most reliable pieces of information you can get without any visual identification at all. Coiling into a tight defensive posture with the head raised is a warning behavior seen across many species, both venomous and harmless. So it signals caution generally rather than confirming venom specifically. Hissing loudly and dramatically is famously associated with hognose snakes, which are completely harmless but put on one of the most convincing threat displays of any North American snake, including flattening their necks like a cobra and even striking with a closed mouth. In other words, dramatic defensive behavior on its own tells you a snake feels threatened, not necessarily that it's dangerous. This actually connects to something worth remembering from earlier in this channel. A snake standing its ground, coiling, or displaying defensively isn't behaving irrationally or with unusual aggression. It's following the same calculated stillness and warning before escalation pattern we've covered before. That defensive display is information you can safely read from a distance, and it should be treated as a clear signal to back away regardless of species. Now let's put this all together into something actually usable in the moment. First, learn the venomous species native to your specific area before you ever need this information in the field. State wildlife agency websites and university extension offices publish accurate, regionally specific range maps for exactly this purpose. And this single piece of homework does more for your safety than any visual trick. Second, treat distance as the actual identification tool. If you can photograph a snake safely from several feet away using a phone's zoom, that photo can be identified later using resources like reputable herpetology forums, extension office hotlines, or wildlife identification apps designed for this exact purpose, all without ever needing to close the distance yourself. Third, use behavior as a distance-safe warning system rather than a species-confirming one. Rattling, loud hissing, or a raised defensive coil should all be treated as a clear signal to increase distance immediately, regardless of what species you think you're looking at. You don't need to know whether a snake is venomous to know that it's telling you to back away. Fourth, and this is the piece that ties everything together. When identification is genuinely uncertain, the correct default is to treat the snake as though it could be venomous. Not because that's statistically likely, but because the cost of being wrong in one direction is dramatically higher than the other. Overestimating risk costs you a few extra feet of distance. Underestimating it can cost you a hospital visit. Here's the bigger picture worth walking away with. Reliable snake identification isn't a party trick you perform in the field at close range. It's homework you do beforehand, combined with distance-based observation and a healthy default toward caution when anything is unclear. The methods that actually keep you safe are the ones that never require you to get closer than you already are. So the next time you spot a snake and that question comes up, is it venomous, you'll know exactly where to look first, not at its pupils. Not at the shape of its head up close. At the distance between you and it, and at what you already know about what lives in your part of the world.